New Zealand a middle power. It's not really a middle power except in the context of the Pacific, where it is important. So I'm only speaking for myself, my personal opinion, but I think it's very important that New Zealand is in a balanced position between its big trading partners. And in that sense, we look at how some of the ASEAN countries have balanced off their economic relationship with China and their strategic relationship with the United States. For example, Singapore has been doing that for a long time. It's important that we learn that from them and continue to be able to trade into the important markets in the world, and clearly China is one of those.
Actually, I could add a little bit to that. It's not really my field, but I see New Zealand, if it is a middle power, as an economy that's able to demonstrate initiatives that are of global relevance. So, for example, its approach to transitioning to renewable sources of energy, in terms of its demonstrated position in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction. So I think New Zealand has a place, and it has demonstrated a role in terms of those creative initiatives globally.
As a matter of fact, New Zealand and a couple of other countries started TPP, is that right? And then, yes, and the TPP, even though TPP didn't really go through, New Zealand started that. New Zealand started almost RCEP. New Zealand started now digital trade partnership agreement. Yes. So, and China has been trying to join that. So New Zealand is quite in this way. You have to say middle power, not middle power. It's smart and brave. And New Zealand is the first country in a lot of ways working with, first Western country working with China on a lot of things. So that's the smart part of New Zealand. Maybe because it's a middle power, it's not big power, has to be smart, or so that's just my opinion.
Well, the Cold War was quite different from what we see now, because you had two trading blocs, the Western Bloc and the Soviet Bloc, and there was no trade between them, almost no trade at all. Actually, if you look today, China and the US have got the biggest bilateral trade ever in human history. There's $1 trillion of product goes backwards and forwards across the Pacific. So that's huge. So we're seeing a gradual decoupling at the moment. But there's still a huge amount of trade between the two countries, and they both need each other from that point of view as well. So from that sense, no, it's not a new Cold War. But we are worried about the possibility of tariffs going up further, about retaliation, about more sanctions, about export and import barriers increasing. And we know that the whole region has got a very interesting history from that. 1 billion people over the last few decades have been raised out of poverty into middle income as a result of the huge trade and the very strong growth, particularly in China, but also in other East Asian countries. So we don't think we should lose the possibility of some of that continuing for the future. And I'm sure that's a view that the ASEAN countries, Australia and New Zealand, a lot of the Latin American countries would all share.
Thank you. I think that's an important point that is raised here. Quite often, if there are tensions between countries, politicians speak to a public. They make public statements that speak to their domestic audiences. I think the advantage of researchers, scholars collaborating is that they speak among each other. So we speak in the same room, we share a lot of understandings with regard to the problems that we're all facing. And there's no need for sort of making big statements. We don't speak to a large audience. We try to address problems. And in doing so, and I think this is important too, we learn the value of cooperation. So as long as we share an understanding like this is a problem, and then I can ask you, what do you think we could do to address this? I can ask others. So this sort of collaboration takes place in a much more private sphere and has much more of a purpose. So that makes, the role of scholars in sort of maintaining channels of communication, trust, joint learning, very important.
If I could add to that, I have, over the years of my career, supervised many postgraduate students from China, and they come to the university, and many of them study problems that are related to China, and then they come back to return to China, and they find themselves in good universities in China, and hopefully that advances the knowledge. The other thing that we do, or have been doing recently, is that we have been bringing professional people into Auckland, into New Zealand, to run courses on our economy and how we structure our economy and the innovations that we've introduced to make our economy run more, I don't want to use the word efficiently, but more satisfactorily, right? And so that is really important in terms of the exchange of professionals coming into our country, taking short courses at the university and then going back to their host governments.
And I would add that one very important thing is that academics are doing work which shows where the policies are working or not. And sometimes that's for governments so they can design them better. Sometimes it's so people generally can understand them better. I do remember being at the APEC leaders meeting some years ago, just after President Trump had been elected the first time. And the leaders were standing around saying, why can't we articulate better why trade is good for people? Because a lot of political leaders have a problem that the media will clearly see if a factory closes because of Chinese competition or something like that. It's a negative piece of news. But if actually economy is getting richer because there's been more trade, people are getting better off as a result of trade, that's not generally news because it's so diffuse. So there's a big job there.